Art is a huge part of Dungeons & Dragons. In fact, I got into D&D because of the art. I used to go and read the monster manuals at my local bookstores before I even properly knew how to play the game. 5th edition does have a really good amount of wonderful art, but I can't deny that from time to time as I look through the books I think, things feel different now. Not everything feels different, but certain aspects of the game feel more cartoonish, video gamey, World of Warcraft, anime. I can't always put my finger on it, but I know that D&D is a game composed of the people who play it. It's a community. You could even call it a subculture. And it changes and morphs along with trends and what's popular at the moment. In the current day, one big influence, of course, is video games, which bring with them a lot of energy and a massive player base, but also a kind of mechanical, systematic approach and an attitude of goofiness and memeing. Another big influence in the current day is diversity. On the one hand, this is great. Who wouldn't want to adventure in a world that has a diverse array of locations and cultures to explore, from mummy-haunted pyramids to pagodas controlled by ancient masters to jungle ziggurats guarded by tribal folk? And the diversity of unique subclasses and exotic races gives us a wealth of options to craft all kinds of different characters. Yet, on the other hand, this makes the game a mishmash, everything goes, kitchen sink, ultra-high fantasy that can lose a sense of cohesion and theme. And all of this reflects in the art, and in turn impacts our own campaigns, for better or worse. I will also be making a video about art that I think is better in 5e than in older editions, so hang tight, the counterpart to this video will get the attention it does deserve. A detail that irks me about the 5e books is that they do not credit the artist directly on the page like in previous editions. I think this was a bad choice on Wizards of the Coast's part. It not only is a disservice to the artist, but it makes it difficult and just inconvenient to figure out who did what art piece. All the interior illustrators are just lumped together on the credits page at the beginning of the books. I'm also not a big fan of the pastel watercolor splashes that are behind each piece of art. Sometimes it does work well, like with the Demi-Lich or the Flame Skull, where it actually enhances and complements the atmospheric effects and the color scheme, or with Zariel or the Warlock entry, where it becomes the environment. But other times it just looks like a spilled coffee stain. I get what they were going for, but does there have to be a blotch of pastel watercolor on every damn page of a 5e book? Now let's take a look at some images from 5e and talk about why I think their prior artwork was better, and these are in no specific order. First of all, we have the Vine Blight. So the new one here is good. It has a general modern fantasy digital art look to it that's clean and shiny. Compare it to the work from 3e, the original done by Wayne Reynolds. It's more of a comic book style. The shadows are more stylized. It has more character and personality to it. There's something eerie about it. There's something in the style of the Wayne Reynolds piece here that's just really pleasant for my eyes to go over. This reminds me of something that I see a lot in the 5th edition artwork, is how the characters and the monsters and creatures all have these blank expressions on their face. But look at this vine horror here. Even though it is inhuman, emotionless, voiceless, you feel a sense of menace. Next, we have a relation of the Vine Blight, which is the Twig Blight. So again, the 5e art is good. I can't really knock it, but when I look at the 4e Twig Blight art, I really like this one. Again, it has this sense of menacing, of threat, of something actually twisted going on here. It's done by the wonderful David Alsop, and he is really good at doing characters that have a eerie and bizarre look to them. He's really good with strange things. In this case, it is a plant, but he's particularly good, I think, with aberrations and undead. This comes from a 4E book called Monster Vault Threats to the Nintir Vale, which might be my favorite bestiary book from 4E. And the third of the blights, we have the Needle Blight. I'm actually going to show some art from 3rd edition that technically is not the Needle Blight. It's called the Splinter Waif, but I believe this monster became the Needle Blight later, or influenced it or morphed into it. I love this artwork so much. It's done by Jonathan Wayshak, who his art is not featured very heavily in D&D, but he did some cool pieces during 3rd edition. And just look at this inking. I love this effect. It's stylized. It has a unique look to it. It has character. It's strange. It almost reminds me a little bit of the Gremlins movies. I love how it's featured on this chunk of land with little pieces of grass coming up, and then you can see the dirt and the roots below it. I like this inking style. I like the flecks of the ink. I love the detail. It actually reminds me of some of the artwork from the Tolkien Illustrated Encyclopedia from 1991. I remember when I was younger, I would just endlessly be absorbed in the artwork in that book. And this style here by Jonathan Wayshak reminds me of the artwork, some of the artwork in that book for like the Barrow Wights and the marching goblin hordes. And actually the Int attack on Isengard piece has a similar aesthetic to this Splinter Waif illustration here in the 3rd edition Monster Manual 3 book. Next we come to the Cadaver Collector, which I do think the 5e art is cool in its own way, but I was disappointed by it. For one, it looks skinnier or scrawnier. It has these smaller feet. It just has lost some of its mass, its bulk, its powerful presence. It also looks rusty, which that could work, but for some reason it's not working for me in this piece. The different plates that compose its body seem a little bit awkward, and the part that I dislike the most is that its actual body no longer has spikes on it, but rather it picks up spears and swords that it finds on battlefields and stabs them through itself and then impales body on that as though it's some kind of corkboard. I don't know. I'm not saying it can't work, but it just doesn't quite come off right to me. Compare it, however, to the 3rd edition art, also used in 4th edition. That's what I'm talking about. It actually has stony musculature underneath it. It has a sense of power, of brawn, and the spikes just grow right off of its armor, and it picks up the bodies and just impales them right onto its own armoring. This 3E illustration was done by Steve Prescott. It was featured in the Monster Manual 3 book, but I believe before that it was featured in the Eberron book. As well, it was used in 4th edition in that same Threats to the Nintir Vale book. And in the table of contents page, there is another illustration for it. So this again is 4th edition art done by Wayne England, who is another artist that I like a lot. And just look at that. Oh, it's grabbing that body up. It just has a sense of eerie menace, power, bulk, the contrast of the teal colors and the foggy atmosphere with that blood red on its claws and the spikes on its upper back. I really feel that one. Next up is the Green Hag. Now, I do really like the 5th edition artwork for the Green Hag. She has a bit of emotion in her face, at least, holding up the heart. So I think that's really nice. I actually like the 5th edition Green Hag artwork better than the 3rd edition one. At least the 3rd edition main artwork, but there is a different one which is done by Wayne Reynolds, and look at that. That's what I'm talking about right there. That is one of the creepiest pieces of D&D art I've ever seen. Now, technically, this is not called Green Hag. This is called Bog Hag, and it comes out of the Oriental Adventures book in 3rd edition. But, a green hag is a bog hag. That's where they dwell. They're bog swamp hags, and they create illusory appearances, but underneath they're these disgusting, black-hearted, malevolent, twisted old witch ladies. I love the long claws, I love the scowling face, the skin layer of the beautiful girl that's getting peeled off to reveal the horrid true form, the flow of that tree in the background, that swamp tree with the moss on it, the slight mistiness at the base. I love this piece so much. Next is the Goblin. That's right, good old common Goblin. Again, the 5th edition art is good. I really can't knock it. And, you know, at least they didn't do a generic type Goblin that's a bald green skin thing that we've seen a bajillion times in things like World of Warcraft and Pathfinder and other sources as well. That's my least favorite look for a Goblin. I like this one here. It could have a little bit more dynamic, more energy, more expression to it, but it's cool. It totally works. Though I like much better the 3rd edition Goblin art by Sam Wood, just out of the Monster Manual. To this day, this is my favorite D&D Goblin art. He has that wonderful Goblin scowl, that punkish, pissed off, raging at the world look on his face, the sunken eyes that are bruised, the skin around them has a bruised coloration, that kind of sickly, dirty look to his skin. The whole thing just looks grimy and scrapped together, like he's cobbled together his ensemble through a number of old battlefields and junkyards. It's fantastic. So thank you to Sam Wood. You carried the 3E Monster Manual. And then related to the Goblin is its larger cousin, the Bugbear. The 5th edition Bugbear, okay, I like it. It's cool. He actually does have a bit more emotion, and his pose, while it is somewhat awkward, at least there is some kind of pose going on. It's cool. I can't knock it. But compared to the 3rd edition Bugbear, yeah, that's what I'm talking about right there. It's like the best comic book, classic comic book style drawing. Technically it's a painting here. It's Wayne Reynolds. He does acrylic paintings out of the 3E Monster Manual. It's just got the wonderful usage of perspective and shadows. It's got the hands nailed onto the shield. It's got a skull hanging down almost like a codpiece. He's got the mismatched lopsided ears. He's got some spikes coming off him. He's got chains wrapped around part. I just really appreciate all those extra details that Wayne Reynolds puts in. He's bulky, he's beefy. He gives you that lumbering oaf of a goblin impression, and I applaud it. I've never seen a better Bugbear than this one. Moving on to the Banderhob, the 5th edition one. He's just standing there. He doesn't have much of an expression, just a totally neutral big frog creature. He does have an arm coming out of his mouth, so I appreciate that detail. Though look at the 4th edition Banderhob. That'll give you nightmares right there. It's got the little kid sleeping in the bed, a candle glowing, the Banderhob creeping up like some freaky amphibian boogeyman, and the expression on his face is like, "Master told me to bring the children back, but I'm so hungry. I can't have just one. What'll it hurt just to eat one of them?" I also appreciate how the nose on it is somewhat human-like. It gives it a uncanny, unsettling effect to it. Fantastic 4E art here done by Howard Lyon from Monster Manual 3. Now another common D&D monster, the Carrion Crawler. The 5th edition Carrion Crawler is notably different than it's been in prior editions. Actually, I do think it was 1st edition where it did look this way, and then they changed it back now in 5th edition. Anyhow, it's got a light tan or honey type coloration to it. Looks definitely more insect-like, sort of a caterpillar look to it, I would say. It's okay, but look at this. That is the Carrion Crawler that I know and love. Just so bizarre. It's got the eye stalks, it's got the mouth with all the fangs, the green coloration to it. This one here, which is my personal favorite, is done by David Griffith. It's in the 4th edition Monster Manual. There's also a nice 4th edition one done by David Alsop. So again, he's really good with freaky type monsters. I really love this look. It has slimy grotesqueness to it, whereas the new one seems more bug-like instead of weird aberration thing. The 3rd edition Monster Manual Carrion Crawler also is great. Again, hats off to Sam Wood. So great work on the 4E and 3E Carrion Crawlers. I wish 5E wouldn't have changed it in the way that it did. Next is a more potent creature, the Merilith, one of my personal favorite demons. The 5th edition artwork, I have to say, disappoints me. She's too bulky looking. Something about it's just too bulky. I don't know if the arms are too thick or if the snake body's too thick. The armor, that's, I think, part of it. The Merilith is a really fast, reactive, skirmishing. She's a really fast type of fighter, and you want a real quick, sleek look to that sort of fighter. This one comes out bulky. Even the swords are thick and bulky. And why is she even wearing armor? Demons don't need armor. They have natural armor. Her hair is all nice and neat in a... I'm not sure what that hairstyle's called. It's not a ponytail, but it's all pulled back in just this one nice, neat sweep. Just doesn't do it for me. I'm not feeling it. The 4th edition Monster Manual Merlith, which actually was done by Sam Wood. He did a great job with this one. It's not so bulky looking, and I like the posture, the pose that she's in better. She's not wearing that silly armor. The hair is more wild looking. I really appreciate that. He also did an illustration for the Merilith in 3rd edition in the Fiendish Codex 1 book. It's the cover of Fiendish Codex 1, and I think he did a great job with this one as well. It has some non-sword weapons, like there's a kind of spear or bident there, which that could be a little awkward with the 6 arms. Not quite sure how she wields all that. The expression on the face is a little bit neutral, but overall it's a very effective piece. I like it. It captures a little bit of that seductive or alluring or erotic side to the Merilith that maybe could distract you for a second, and then she just slaughters you because she is a horrible monster, chaotic evil greater demon. I also appreciate the 2nd edition Merilith. Just has that old school black and white ink drawing look that I really like. Though my very favorite Merilith illustration comes from 4th edition. It's from the miniatures set, Savage Encounters. So this was box art for these minis. It was done by the fantastic artist Karim Bayet. And just look at that. I love the color scheme. I like the layout. Karim did this a lot in the 4E art, where there is a panel, a rectangular pane of background that helps the character pop, and it also gives you a sense of atmosphere or environment. I like the pose. I love the cross swords up top, the cross swords in the midsection, and the 2 out to the side. It captures something about the Merilith, that even though she is a demon, chaotic evil, she is better able to organize other demons, to lead them. She's got a real intelligent cunning about her, and this pose signifies that. She is more than just a wild, mayhem-inducing, blind rage and fury type of monster. I also like the dark stripe about her eyes. Her hair is a bit more on the wild side, and she has a nice, lithe, agile, dexterous, reactive look to her. She just looks alive and ready to strike faster than the blink of an eye. The next monster that we're going to take a look at is a Dryad. So the 5th edition Dryad looks good. It kind of reminds me of a woman wearing a bath towel, though. Or maybe a swimming suit. It's not bad. I get what they were going for. She's cloaked in leaves. Her hair is leaves. But again, just has that neutral posture, neutral expression. She's just standing there like a mannequin. The 4th edition Dryad took things in a different direction. They went with more of a literally tree-type creature, somewhat feminine in shape, but definitely does not look like a human or an elf woman in any way. Has a more aggressive and even sinister tone to it. It's good, it totally works, and I appreciate it. Though my favorite is the 3rd edition Dryad out of the 3E Monster Manual, done by, you guessed it, Sam Wood. Really like this one. This one really expresses the feminine spirit in all of its forms. The posture that she's in, the shape of her breasts and her curves of her hip. There's even that nice rounded belly button area in the stomach. The hair is more wild. She's very lithe. The face has that bewildering, strangely enchanting, but with a dark side to it, look that Fae can have, and I appreciate in Fae. And that, I think, is reflective of the overall piece. There is a part of it that's alluring, it's attractive. But the more you look at it, you start to realize that things have a strange proportion to them, and there's a threatening demeanor about her. There's something that makes you think, beware. Beware of the tree spirits, because they may have other intentions than just frolicking with you in the forest. We're going on to the 5E Gargoyle. Oh my, it's muted, soft tones, kind of pastel-y, slightly menacing, but overall pretty neutral type look to its posture and its expression. I don't really feel much. I don't feel much of anything when I look at this. The 4E Gargoyle is much better. This one's done by Ron Spears. He did a lot of 4E art. Nice angle there. I really like the perspective. It looks active. It looks like it was a statue just a split second before, and now it's activated and it's about to pounce or swoop down on you. It's got that nice jutting underbite with the tusks. The horns and the ears have a nice angles to them. The wings, the tail, the whole thing just has a great composure in the sense of underlighting and backlighting contrasted with the shadow. It's really nice. This piece, however, is inspired by the 3rd edition Gargoyle done by Wayne Reynolds. So I'm kind of not sure why they didn't just keep the Wayne Reynolds art for 4E, but whatever, that's besides the point. Look at that. Look at the reach of those arms. Look at the position that the hands and claws are in. It keeps that sense of multi-angled lighting. It has deep, dark shadows, which I really appreciate that. I like deep, dark shadows in monster art. I really appreciate the detail of those shoulder spikes, the exaggerated horns, the really exaggerated tusks and underbite and scowl. Wayne Reynolds just is fantastic at doing this comic book style translated into D&D acrylic paintings. I could look at this gargoyle all day long. I love gargoyles, a classic monster that I've enjoyed throughout my entire life. So we need to talk about halflings. 5th edition, what have you done to the halflings? Why? Now they are these big head things. They all have these oversized fat heads and then these itty bitty hands and feet. It's just so goofy. The proportions are weird. It doesn't make me want to play a halfling. It makes me want to laugh at halflings. They look goofy. They look awkward. Pretty much all other halflings are better. So I don't even know where to begin. The 4E halflings done by David Griffith here. I think those are really nice. Even they are not really that stylized. Nothing about it really grabs me. It's kind of neutral, but they look great. They look fine. This makes me want to play a halfling. There's another piece that I particularly like of halfling art from 4th edition, the Shadow Weaver, I believe it was. I'm forgetting the name of it. It was one of the Paragon paths, I believe, for Warlock, maybe Wizard. But I really appreciate this look. Reminds me of Hobbits, but in a good way. So yeah, pretty much all halflings before 5th edition, pull any image and you're probably going to like it better than 5th edition halfling. Now we have the Oni, another monster of mine that I am fond of. So the 5E Oni, it's not bad. It's kind of cool in its own way. I like the cloak. It has a stalker or lurker in the night feeling to it. It's got these ripped pants that kind of remind me of the Hulk, or maybe like old school werewolves after they've wolfed out from being a man. It's cool. I'll take it. But I much prefer the 4th edition Oni. Look at that one. A lot more style going on. And has, Japanese aesthetic and bits of armor and clothing. Has that really nice sword. What would we call that sword? I don't know. Maybe the European equivalent would be a falchion. I think in D&D it's just a great sword. I love the face. I love the way the lips and the tusks are done, and the scowl of the eyes, the hair and the horns, the blue color. Really good artwork here. That one was, that was Sam Wood. It's out of the Monster Manual. However, there's one that I like even better, which again is Wayne Reynolds, out of 3rd edition. Now, this was back when it was called Ogre Mage, but we all knew that it was Oni. Just a round of applause to Wayne Reynolds. He consistently knocks it out of the park. Unfortunately, he hasn't been doing much artwork for 5th edition. He's been doing a lot with Magic the Gathering, I know, and he has gone even more stylized and more hyper, I would say, with his style. And sometimes I'm a little bit on the fence with that. Some of his pieces, they go a little bit too far for me, but still, just an amazing artist. The way he composes things draws your eye all around the image. You get lots of interesting things to look at, from the bit of chainmail skirt to the pouch, to the studs on the bracers, to the hair that's sweeping back, the scar going across his face, the veins, the musculature, the usage of shadows and highlights, the color of the skin, the textures, the models, the warts. He just is very aesthetically pleasing with his art pieces, so big applause to that. Now we're going to look at the Furbolg. The 5th edition Furbolg reminds me of a Muppet. It's a fluffy, cuddly Muppet, maybe a drunk Muppet as well, because he has this red nose. It works for what it is, I suppose, but for the Furbolg has never been this. The Furbolg has always been much wilder, much more savage. Here's the 4th edition Furbolg, which is my personal favorite. This one was in Monster Manual 2. It was done by Steve Prescott. It just has so much more intensity to it, more style, more character. You can actually see the different types of Furbolg roles here. There's a bestial berserker one. There is a warrior warlord. There is a raven shaman with like a raven scythe or raven war pick with the ravens fluttering behind it. It's got a sense of atmosphere. You can see the indication of dreary pines in the background. It just has energy and character. I really appreciate it. I even like some of the older Furbolg art, like the 2nd edition one. They were sort of like half giant people. And look at that. That's just great. I know it's a bit simpler, but I just appreciate this physical, strong, reminds me of Masters of the Universe or Swords and Sorcery. I really dig that look, and the hand-drawn look is something that I'll always be appreciative of. The Devourer in 5th edition is okay. The face kind of looks like an alien to me, to be honest, like a sci-fi alien, which to me doesn't fit quite so well with the Dungeons and Dragons medieval fantasy look. It at least does have the trapped soul within the rib cage. I think the hands look pretty cool on this. So there are some aspects of it that I can appreciate. It just doesn't work for me as much as the David Alsop one from 4th edition. There's actually 3 different Devourers in there, and it's just so eerie, so bizarre. He's really good with his colors as well. I really appreciate the hazy, rusty to somewhat magenta purplish hue in the background, contrasted with the teal lighting coming out of the center of the taller, greater Devourer, and it has souls impaled on spikes, and then the other one is the classic Devourer with the soul trapped inside of its rib cage, the freaky long tongue coming out, the expressions that he is actually an artist that is able to give a slightly blank expression, but in a way that's unsettling. They're just creepy. They have a nice stylization to them. nice textures, nice colors. David Alsop is another artist who is just a pleasure to look at his art, and your eyes go all over the page, drinking in all the wonderful details. Another kind of old school D&D art that I want to talk about for just a little bit here are the old school spreads. Now, these might have been for covers, or they might have been full-page pieces of artwork. Sometimes they're not even for D&D source books, but more like D&D novels. But there are some classic artists, and most of these are from the 2nd edition or later 1st edition time period, so like mid-late 80s and early 90s. And a lot of them have a old school or swords and sorcery look to them, which I appreciate it so much. I really think it's a pleasure to look at these old school art spreads. Larry Elmore is the first artist that I want to point out here. This is the piece of his called Dragon Slayers. It's for the 2nd edition Player's Handbook. And you just don't get art like this anymore. It lets the artwork be. It's not contrived. It doesn't try to chop it up and splash it in there with pastel watercolor spills. It's just a piece of art, a full art, painted rendition. The characters are more realistic looking. There's so much I could talk about in this piece, but something about it just feels more genuine. It feels more truthful. It feels more human. It feels more historical in a way, and I miss that so much in D&D art. There's a couple more Larry Elmore pieces that I like quite a bit. This one here is called Cataclysm, and this one is from a novel, I believe. Yeah, it's a Dragonlance paperback from 1992 called The Cataclysm. I love the snowy landscape, the Death Knight, the horse. I really wish we could still get artwork like this. Nowadays, everyone seems to be just dead set on making everything flashy and cartoony or video gamey. This, though, the soul, what I mean by that, I mean it has a depth and a genuineness to it. And I think that has gotten lost in the super fast-paced, high-tech age that we live in. The next old school artist that I want to show is Clyde Caldwell, another fantastic painter. First is From the Shadows. This is a module from the Ravenloft setting in 2nd edition. And this is actually not terribly different from modern fantasy D&D art, but if you look at it long enough and you really pay attention, you can start to notice details that let you know it is old school, because there's just something more classic to the look. It doesn't go as far with exaggerating things like a lot of art nowadays does. The next one is Hands of Doom. It's from the Dragonlance calendar from 1987. Definitely has an 80s look to it, but it's so rich. It's rich with detail. I love the hands coming up out of the bog. The expression on her face, I think, could have a little bit more emotion to it, but I'm willing to forgive that, because look at this environment, the trees, the limbs, the foreboding. It's just, all of it looks like a haunted forest, and the Death Knight standing there with the great detail work of his armor, his cape, his helmet. The next Clyde Caldwell piece is Kindred Spirits, is a Dragonlance novel from 91. You don't see dwarves like that anymore. Dwarves now have to be these super puffed up, bulky things with pauldrons that are bigger than their own heads. I just really appreciate this more realistic style of painting. And then we've got, of course, the original Ravenloft art. This is where it all began, right here. This was 1983. This is the module that started it all. If you like Curse of Strahd, if you like the Innistrad setting in Magic the Gathering, this is the origin of it. Just looking out across his balcony, wind billowing his cape, gargoyles, sneering, lightning, the bats, the fog, the vines creeping up the pillar, the spear-tipped gate raising behind him, the backlighting, his red eyes gazing out across Barovia. Keith Parkinson is the last of the old school artists that I wanted to bring up here. Here is his piece, Lord Soth's Charge. So this would actually be related with Ravenloft as well. I really get into the details of the horse's hooves tearing across the ground here with the rock and dirt or sand and these tufts of scrub grass, the foreboding dark clouded sky, the skeletal warriors, Soth, the Death Knight, the way there's this red fell mist or light coming out of his implement there. Again, it's classic, timeless art done by an actual masterful painter. And then his other piece, Flight of the Dragon Lance. Look at this environment. I wish so much I could open up current D&D books and see this kind of environment. Unfortunately, if there was something like this nowadays, it would be ripped in half, and then the edges would have these watercolor splashes bleeding off of it. And the dwarf couldn't just be this honest worker of the earth, a warrior to defend his clan. No, he also has to be this bulky, rotund thing with a warhammer that's bigger than his own body and a helmet that looks like it was made out of 3-inch thick steel. When I see this art, I just see a rugged warrior, a man, engaged in conversation or maybe even dispute with a dwarf without any other pretenses, without any other agendas, without any other need to prove themselves to anything. They only need to get by in this rugged and frigid land. Here's a piece called Arcane Summons. It actually is not from a D&D book, I found out, but again, it very well could have been. It's the same artist that did art for D&D. It's the same style, it's the same kind of aesthetic. And the Knoll warlock or shaman raising up skeletons out of a cold swamp, a winter bog, is just fantastic. I love the colors, I love the environment, I love the detail work. It's gruesome, yet it's mixed with nature at the same time. And then his final piece also is technically not a D&D piece, but again, it very well could have been. It's called the Elf Queen of Shinara. Fantastic usage of lighting, of atmosphere, of environment, of a real sense of understanding of materials, of clothing, of period garb, of realistic armor and weapons. An interesting thing that I came across as I was doing a little bit of research about this novel, it's from 1992, and at a part in it, the characters visit an island known as Morrowindle. Yeah, Morrowindle. I'm looking at you, Bethesda. It's just like Morrowind, but you take the L off. So 5e does have spreads in it. I'm not saying there are no spreads, and obviously there's cover art, and some of them are great. They're great in their own way. Take the Lost Mines of Phandelver as just one example that quickly comes to my mind. Ignoring the obvious question of why the hell the party is shown fighting an ancient dragon in an introductory adventure that's levels 1 to 5, the piece in and of itself has energy, action, dynamics, it has a great environment, and it has a pleasantly cohesive color palette. I also really like the detail of the wisps of gas trailing from the dragon's mouth, showing us the very instant before this dragon absolutely obliterates this party of, at most, 5th level adventurers. As I said earlier, it can be hard for me to articulate what it is exactly about some of the 5e art that does not transmit so well for me. Many pieces actually are really nice. Some of them are even the best ever, and I'll get to that in the next video, but not all of the art pieces are. It seems that 5e went for a very generalized look and a neutral approach with the art, instead of stylization, emotion, or personality. Gone are the days of Thomas M. Baxa, Mark Teeton, and Rebecca Guay. Now we have sameness. As much as D&D claims to be champions of diversity, there's no artistic diversity in the art style. We would never see a shadowy inking like that of Jonathan Weishak, nor the realistic traditional paintings of Caldwell, Elmore, or Parkinson, nor the raw physicality of the swords and sorcery style that composed much of the game's original aesthetic. Now, so much of the art is sterile and safe. Well, if you ask me, I don't want my RPGs to be sterile and safe. I want grit, I want guts, I want personality. I feel like I could keep going on about this. There's a lot of art that I did prefer in earlier editions, so maybe it will merit a second video. But until then, thank you very much for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you're not already subscribed. You can also check me out on Patreon. I make a lot of exclusive rewards for the fine folks who support me there. I also release free things there like free newsletter and maps, so check it out either way. And as always, may your adventures be many.